Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is your post OU week. We've got a little game. It's number 5 Georgia is coming into DKR to face your number 1 Longhorns. This is your roundtable.
We didn't come this far just to come this far.
We want to be legendary, Terry.
All right, we are joined by Justin, Paul, and Ian. We're going to have Eric joining us a little bit later, but this is the week where narratives have been literally penetrating everything. You know, we have 2 former Saban coaches. We have an offensive mind, a defensive mind. And the reason I really feel like that has been so prevalent this week in particular is both sides seem to be filled with a deep sense of uncertainty. Georgia's been playing very inconsistent. Texas, the narrative is we haven't played anybody, which objectively there's some truth in that. So what are we going to see on Saturday is really the question. And the beauty of all of this is we're going to get an answer. And I think that's the key. Now, Paul, you've been looking at this game. You and Ian, everybody's been really digging into this. And if there was something with that uncertainty, with those air of not necessarily knowing how this is going to go in contrast to some other games that we've played. What are some areas that give you in particular a sense of uncertainty with Texas?
I think it starts with Quinn Ewers and his health. He didn't play well against Oklahoma. It's an interesting thing to say when you beat OU by 31 in Dallas. But the fact is we probably left at least 2 touchdowns out on the field. Ewers was not himself. He'd probably tell you that. I think he has said that. And whether that's because of his injury or a little rust or his mechanics fell apart or some bit of all the above, we need a good, healthy on Quinn Ewers. And if we do have that guy, there's a lot less uncertainty about the Texas offense. And I'm pretty sure they score in the 30s on this Georgia defense. And if Texas gets up in the 30s, it's going to be very hard for Georgia to match that unless Carson Beck just absolutely goes off. And, I have a feeling that Texas is going to have some things for them on defense. But the number one air of uncertainty, I think, for all of this is Quinn Ewers' health and readiness and sort of proficiency in this game on Saturday.
Izzy, I'll send it over to you. Is there anything in particular? Obviously, the corners haven't been tested as much as we thought they would have against some offenses. I'm thinking Colorado State here. This is pretty pass heavy. We pretty much shut down that as an option. What are you feeling in terms of this much improved secondary going into what will be the most prolific offense that we face this year, certainly, and the most experienced quarterback, arguably?
I mean, that's basically the summation of it, is that this is a very good offensive line. They're going to have a better chance of blocking Texas than any line they've faced up till now, and particularly blocking the pass rush. Carson Beck is far and away the best quarterback they're facing this season to date, probably that will appear on the schedule, I think, unless they face like a Nussmeier or somebody in the playoffs or something. The receivers are maybe not too terrifying. They don't appear to be, but they're good. They're not terrible players. So just the all around, they're just going to graduate from 101 to 301 in pass defense. And we'll see what that jump is like for them. I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be good, but you got to see it to be sure.
Do you think there's an element of this, and I've heard this take, and it makes a little bit of sense to me, the idea that this is going to be a game, and Eric talks about this a little bit too, is where Texas is facing arguably its mirror. They're facing athletes that are just as strong, athletes that are just as fast. Do you think there's going to be that initial shock, as it were, like jumping into cold water before you acclimate to this? Do you see that happening with this defense?
Not with the Georgia defense, because I don't think this Georgia defense is meaningfully better than either the Oklahoma or the Michigan defenses. They might be a little bit better. It's hard to tell. They might be a little worse. So not on that side. For the defense, it could be the case where when you face there's a big difference between you're covering up ULM's receivers, Colorado State's receivers, and their quarterback can't even try to hit a window because he has a pass rush in his face, or he can't hope to hit, and he just doesn't even try. And then you play Georgia, and you think you're in pretty good coverage, and then all of a sudden it's like, boy, they haven't got to him yet. And then the next second, Carson Beck puts a dime right on your guy, and you can't quite get to it. That'd be the fear. That'd be the higher level of competition where it's like, oh, we haven't faced this before. This is different.
Justin, I want to get to recruits here in a second because this is a big recruiting weekend for Texas. Obviously, this is the game that folks want to be at. Let me rephrase that. I don't necessarily think we have a big group of folks coming in, but this would be a game that a lot of those recruits may have circled for no other reason than a nice trip to Austin and to see a good football game. Is there anything in particular we need to be noting? How many recruits do we have in the fold that are looking at both of those schools and we're competing with Georgia?
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, this is about as big as it gets for guys like me that what we do for a living. Because usually Texas hosts anywhere from 70 to 100 recruits per game. But among those recruits, probably 30 might have offers. And a lot of those other guys are just local kids. They're filler kids. They could be a lot younger, and they're just trying to get early, establishing a little bit of connection with some 2027s, 2028, stuff like that. On this visitor list that we have at InsideTexas.com, there's almost 60 guys, and virtually every single one has a Texas offer. Now, Georgia has offered a good chunk of these guys as well. So there's a lot of crossover recruits here. And if you look at both rosters, there's a lot of guys that both teams offered on this. And so which kind of counters what Eric was talking about how it kind of mirrors each other. But for this game, I mean, look, I've talked to recruits and they'll tell you going to a Texas game during the day is fun. It's a lot of fun. But going at night is different. And I think this game in particular is going to be more different than anything any of them have ever seen. Last time, the most recent memory is 2022 Alabama. And I say that because there were kids in the stands for that game that are going to be on this field playing Saturday. That's how big that game was at that time. And here, Texas, there was like 200 kids that requested tickets for this, and they made this an invite-only type of deal. So they're cherry picking who they're bringing in. They're particular on their priority board on who they're bringing in and who they're going to talk to. And so it's huge. It's ginormous. One game doesn't determine a recruitment, but my goodness, this thing is going to leave an impression one way or another. It's going to leave an impression on these recruits when they leave. They're probably getting a greater sense of both these teams, but there's some overlap for both of them. Look what Texas is trying to do the last two cycles. They're going into Georgia and mining prospects. Defensive linemen, offensive linemen. Georgia that state has grown football, high school football wise in the last 5 or 6 years. I mean, they've always been a good state for high school football, but they've really amped it up in the last 5 or 6 years. And I think some of that's because the home state school won back-to-back national championships. Sometimes that has a correlation to it. But at the end of the day, man, this is Sark and his recruiting staff at their best. They are going to have everything top of the line, top notch. The atmosphere, they're going to break the stadium record. It's going to be attendance record. It's going to be exactly what you would want a setup to be for the top recruits in the country. And right now, Texas is recruiting about as hot and as heavy as any team in the nation. A lot of crossover guys, but that means you're doing business well. Georgia is a standard in college football. You want to be able to recruit to that level. Sark has surpassed that. He's been able to do that. This weekend is going to be big. Listen, you could see a commitment coming out of this. You could see some real, jockeying for some really strong positioning down the stretch for some of these defensive linemen that are in state in Georgia, because Georgia wants Joseph Mbachu. Georgia wants Kevin Wynn. These are both guys on Texas radar. So just to try to summarize that long ass answer, it's what we look forward to this kind of deal, because it's really a collection of the best football players in the entire country are going to converge in Austin for about 4 hours. And I cannot wait to not just see what happens on the field, but get their takes afterwards, because that's going to resonate when we're seeing big games in 2027 and 2028.
If you want to get those takes, if you want to get into the analysis of what's been going on this week, we invite you to join us. This is a special flash sale that we're doing for the Georgia game specifically. This weekend, we are bringing back the Inside Texas Tailgate, which will be in Austin. If you want information on that, join us on the site. It's going to be a great opportunity to take the community from the board, have everybody be there in person, and enjoy this experience as a community. And we would love for you to join us. It's $1 all up until the Georgia game. And then after that, you're getting 50% off your first year. This is the best deal that we offer, and we would love for you to join us. Paul, one thing that you noted in your live this week with Connor was the tempo that Georgia operates with. It's generally a very deliberate tempo. But when you look at the second half of Alabama, and certainly in that Auburn game, they started to move a little bit more up tempo and were very effective in that regard. Is that an element of their game you might expect to see this weekend, or do you see them going back to their more deliberate pace?
They're deliberate until you make them do something different.
Right.
if they fall behind, they pick up tempo because they understand they need to get more possessions in the game to increase their chances of winning. But like Texas, these are actually two really good offenses, but they play deliberately. So they're not trying to just put up massive yardage and extra possessions. They're also trying to play complementary football, right? That overused sort of cliched term that we use, but actually has some meaning, which is you also want to preserve your defense and find that right spot between getting your offense enough possessions to score and separate, but also making sure that you give your defense an opportunity to play less defense, because that's one of the keys of playing good defense is play less. So I don't think they're going to have a huge alteration there. Could they come out with one series and run tempo? Sure, of course. They could go, sugar huddle or even no huddle, have 3 or 4 plays that they have designated that Carson calls on the line, but you'll see that for one drive. It's like a changeup.
One of the things, and you mentioned the defense, and I want to bring this up. This is, as you know, I'd love to get into the analytics of these games. And one of the statistics I found absolutely staggering was the idea that the opposing team's red zone scoring percentage is 84% for Georgia. And again, these are silly stats, but that seems like a very high number. Ian,
that's ridiculously high.
What do you attribute that to? Obviously, outside of opponents played.
That's kind of shocking, actually. Opponents played; they have played a difficult schedule, but that's still bizarre that it's so high. I'd be curious what the touchdown to field goal rate looks like.
Sure.
Also, like Alabama is tough to keep out of the red zone, out of the end zone, because they have a huge, powerful, athletic quarterback. I'm curious what that looked like against some of these other teams, and why some of the details. Just on the surface, Texas looks dominant. That's not surprising. We know that Texas isn't giving up points this year. But Georgia, that's shocking. It's not terrible if they're mostly field goals, but it just doesn't look very good.
It's 12 out of 14, so that's correct. But touchdowns, it's 6 out of 14.
Which, if you're a defense and you're trying to keep, I feel like the Kentucky game was half that.
That's a fair point.
Kentucky kicked 4 field goals, right?
Yeah. And Kentucky's going to score in red zone anyway.
The beauty The beauty of the deep stats analysis is these are obviously just absolute buck wild crazy numbers. Just to go through a couple of them, obviously Texas has had 15 mascots to Georgia's 11. I'm going to give this one to Georgia. They're clearly taking care of their animals better. And I want to say lastly, again, this is my favorite statistic. We're looking at admissions acceptance rates. Guys, Georgia is down there at 37.3%. Again, giving the edge to Georgia for serving their community better. So if you're looking at the deep stats here, you've got Georgia down the board, which makes things a little bit leery going into these final predictions. But before we get to those final predictions, I would love to hear from our sponsor, the incomparable Laura Baker, who has helped our very own Ian Boyd come down into God's country. Hi, I want to tell you about Laura Baker. If you're looking for a new home in the 512 or even at this point, let's face it, 737 area code, there's only one number to call. That's Laura Baker at 512-784-0505. As a member of the elite Andy Allen team with Keller Williams, Laura has helped Longhorns find the home of their dreams in Central Texas. Just ask our resident sex symbol, Ian Boyd, who moved all the way from Michigan to Texas with Laura's help. Laura can help you find what you're looking for in the 512, the 737, or even parts of the 254 and the 210. Just, give her a call at 512-784-0505. Her email is in the description as well as the rest of her contact details. She's a friend. Give her a call. All right, guys, it is that time of day. Time to get the scores from the people that know best. And we're going to start with Eric. Eric, this week has been full of, honestly, a lot of great analysis. We've had a lot of crossover with the On3 community, having the guys from UGA over here, Joe Cookie going over there. We're getting a lot of insight. And what seems to be the prevailing thought amongst both fan bases is a deep sense of uncertainty. And I know that you've even mentioned that in your writing, and it's come out in some of the videos that we've had this week. What are some of the things that you're uncertain about, and how is that affecting how you're projecting this game? And I'd obviously love to get your score prediction as well.
Yeah, there are competing narratives that both have merit. A lot of times narratives are, full of garbage, but Texas hasn't really played anybody good yet. We knew Michigan was limited on offense, so you had its issues. But on the other side, Georgia has been up and down. They're not nearly as good as they were when they went back to back. They're not the same team. They're not as cohesive on defense. The running game is not as strong as it typically is. So both these narratives have merit. Texas hasn't played anybody. Georgia's not quite as good. But I can understand the certainty just because they are, fairly evenly matched. It's the first time Texas is going to play a team that looks like them in the mirror. Same size, same athleticism, can throw the ball down the field. Two good quarterbacks. So I can understand the uncertainty, on both fan bases, and I think both fan bases are pretty clear-eyed about this game. To me, it should be close. The one thing that I'll be watching for is how good is Quinn, because Carson Beck can be his equal, and that's both up and down. Both those guys can make some ill-advised throws, but both guys can also punish you down the field and control the game from the pocket. And guys can actually make some plays with their legs at times too, move the pocket or actually, break out, get to the sideline, get a first down. So that's, to me, it's going to come down to that. But I have been doing a lot of studying lately, and I just feel like Texas is better across the board by a smidge. Everywhere I look, I think Texas wide receivers block better than their wide receivers. I think Texas wide receivers are block enough to create space on the perimeter. We saw that versus OU. I think I've seen Georgia DBs have trouble getting off blocks. I think Texas edges are better. I think they're going to do a better job getting pass rush. I think Texas offensive line is just a little bit better. Where they're equals, like I said, quarterback. But given the fact that I think Texas is just a little bit better across the board, I've got them winning a close one, 31-24.
Over to you, Ian. What do you see this going? How do you see this going in terms of score? What are some of the things that you're looking for specifically early in the game? I understand that this is going to be Texas's arguably their first full 4-quarter game that they're going to be in. What do you see, and how do you see this going? What's your prediction?
I don't know what we're going to get from Quinn. And so that's like if Quinn is good, I think Texas can score 30 plus. I think they could put a lot of pressure on Georgia. Might actually lead to more scoring from Georgia if Georgia starts flinging it around, trying to play catch up. And then in that case, the score would be something like Texas 38, Georgia 28, Georgia 31, something like that. But I don't know if the game's going to go that way. I think Texas's defense is going to end up showing out really well and proving something this week. And I bet Quinn will be better, but I don't think he's going to be all the way back. So I'm optimistic for the Longhorns. I'm going to say something in the realm of 27-17.
Justin, where do you see this going?
Yeah, I can't argue with Ian or Izzy. It's just not right. I think it's exactly that. It's going to be close. I was actually leaning Georgia earlier this week just because it feels like anytime you see the consensus fully go to one side, you need to pay attention. And it's not just us, it's been the national media, it's been the recruits. I've talked to almost 30 recruits, and I have yet to get a Georgia prediction. And so I'm leery when it comes to that much. It's like flood all the way on one side. But I'm with Ian. I think the defense is going to, like, Texas knows, everybody thinks of Texas, they think scoring. They think passing, attack, all that kind of stuff, speed on the outside. Texas defense is going to be the reason they win this game because Carson Beck is by far the best quarterback they faced this year. He's the only one at this point that's going to play on Sundays, and I think that's significant. I've got Texas winning very, very close, 27-24. Honestly, it's going to be strange watching Texas give up a touchdown.
It's true.
That's going to be a new thing for us that we're going to have to get used to. But I mean, 6 weeks into the season, that's a pretty cool problem to have. But it's going to be close. I give Texas the advantage because it's at home. If this was in Athens, I'd probably lean towards Georgia by a field goal. But I got Texas in this one, 27-24.
Paul, last week you broke the mold and went into a philosophical perspective on your score predictions, picking 1-0. That's all you wanted, stealing from our beloved Tom Herman, who probably gave you a kiss on the cheek right before that call. How are you going to alter that this week? Are you staying straight down the lane? What's your prediction for this Georgia-Texas game?
I could go 2-0 and double down on being that obnoxious guy who tries to take everything to macro. But no, I'm going to give you an actual score prediction. I think Quinn Ewers will be better, but I'm not sure how much better. I'm not sure how much all the way back he is. I do think Sark's going to have an amazing game plan isolating those Georgia cornerbacks who Kirby Smart will dearly try to hide. I think Texas wins 31-24 in front of a crowd that's lit. I think we're going to have 105,000 people going nuts at night. And I think the fact that it's a home game for Texas is probably the most underanalyzed part of this whole game. People are acting like, oh, well, it's Georgia, they can go anywhere. Look, Kirby Smart, since he's been at Georgia, he's done a phenomenal job with the program, taking nothing away from them. But they've been in the SEC East, and that's afforded them some pretty easy, long sections of schedule in their time there. And they show up to the SEC title game and the playoffs tanned, rested, and ready. And this year, they're getting a very different kind of schedule. So Kirby Smart at Georgia, 9-6 all time against top 5 teams. How many of those 15 games against top 5 teams has he played a true road game? The answer is 2. They've gone on the road twice to hostile environments playing top 5 teams. And they've lost both of them to Alabama. And they're going to get their third loss in Austin, Texas, Saturday night.
This has been a week of stories, a week of narratives. Those are predicated on the idea of uncertainty. This is not the back-to-back national championship Georgia team, and this is not the old Texas team that we've seen over the last 5 years. There's been steady improvement from Texas. This is a new DKR. I can say that unequivocally. Certainly from my time there, this place is now a formidable place to play, and that wasn't always the case at DKR. And that's a lot of credit to CDC and his team that have made the game experience truly outstanding. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your time here today. Please join us an hour before the game for our pregame. And then the second that score clock hits 000, we are going to be there. On behalf of Justin, Izzy, Ian, Paul, and myself, thank you so much, and hook 'em.